Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jonathan Ahl. East St. Louis has one of the highest murder rates in the country, and our investigative reporter Beth Hundsdorfer is looking into it and specifically what's going on in the housing authority in that area. Beth, thanks for being with us and being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So violence in East St. Louis is nothing new.
No, it's not. I think it was surprising to find out how prevalent it is, and to see how high the murder rate. It's the highest in the country per capita. And it's higher than most countries except some in Central America. And this has been going on for decades, unabated. And nobody keeps track of the murders that do get solved and what the prosecution rate is. So the problem goes on in perpetuity. And there's children and there's families and there's people who are trying to go to jobs and live everyday lives amongst this violence.
In your reporting, which is at stlpublicradio.org and was also published in the Belleville News-Democrat, some really heart-wrenching words from children that are very aware of the violence that they see.
Yeah, we heard stories about kids waking up and seeing a body outside their bedroom window, having a crime scene outside their door and having to walk past it on the way to school. And, there was some studies by the Erickson Institute about how violence can affect the brain, especially when it's in its really formative period between birth and 5 years old. That's when a lot of growth and development and language starts happening, and this is happening to kids amongst this violence. And it kind of changes the way the brain reacts to things.
There's a couple of specific things from your reporting I'd love to learn a little bit more about. The first of it is how the federal government was involved and kind of the kerfuffle between Senator Durbin and the mayor of East St. Louis.
Right. Years ago, there was the clubs were open all night. It was an entertainment center for the metro area. And there was a lot of violence that were coming out of these clubs. We heard stories about gun battles on the interstate to and from the clubs, and lots of people getting shot, weapons being brought into these clubs. So Durbin suggested that they have a set closing time. Now, this would have meant a loss of revenue for a place that was already struggling. So the mayor at the time, Alvin Parks, resisted that. And eventually what happened was the federal government was paying, I think it was for 2 police officers to kind of help patrol the housing authority. And when the clubs didn't have a set closing time, they pulled that funding and started a security force for the housing authority alone, which sounds like a great idea, except they don't have the power to do anything but write trespassing tickets and disturbing the peace tickets, and to make sure that people who are on the banned list aren't on the premises. So they have no power to investigate or pursue any kind of more serious crimes that are occurring at the housing authority.
Well, that raises a couple of questions. First of all, is the security detail without the full police powers better or worse than just having 2 police officers that were assigned to that? And so did what kind of amounts to sort of a political retribution issue, did that make the situation in East St. Louis even worse?
I don't know if it made it worse. It's kind of hard to quantify that. But what we do know is that the housing authority, by its nature, a lot of people live there. It's a concentrated area of people. And there's a lot of gun violence that happens there. And the security force, I'm not sure if it is enough of a deterrent to knock down crime there. And a lot of people don't. We had a talk to an expert who talked about community trauma. if you can't trust in the institutions that are supposed to come in and fix your toilet when it's leaking, then it's hard to trust the security force. It's hard to trust the police. It's hard to trust the government when you can't rely that they will provide the most basic of services that they're supposed to.
Why can't that security detail do more? I mean, because we certainly are aware of subsections of government that have their own police forces that do have those kinds of powers. I'm thinking like a university campus, for example. They have their own police force that can investigate crimes and have full police powers. Why doesn't that exist at the housing authority?
I think it's about money and training. You have to go through an extensive training course to be able to be a certified police officer. I don't know if that's if the resources are there, if the time is there, or if there's been any political will to push that forward.
What was the most shocking thing that you found in your investigation?
I think just how open this has become. We had a story about kids getting off a school bus and going to an after-school program, and there's people outside shooting guns to the point where the sister who runs the program had to call the school to have the school bus pull around front so the kids weren't walking in gunfire. This is at 3:00 in the afternoon. I don't think a lot of us can conceive of having hurt children being in that kind of situation. And I think that it's a shame, and it's something everyone needs to be aware of, that it's going on right in the metro area right now.
Where's the outrage? I mean, because I think that if this level of violence happened in many other places in the St. Louis area, there would be huge community outrage. But since it's been going on for so long in St. Louis, and you talk about almost a complacency and acceptance among the people who live there and the elected officials who are there, is there anyone who's really angry and outraged and demanding some answers? And is anybody listening?
I think that there are people who would like to see this change, obviously. I think there are good people there are good cops on the street that want to solve this problem. I think there are well-intentioned politicians that want to solve this problem, but I don't know if the will is there to actually make a difference and how to step in and change something that's been going on for decades. Some people have said when we were reporting this, well, yes, of course, East St. Louis is dangerous, but there's also good stuff going on in East St. Louis. I mean, there are families that live there. There are people who run businesses there. There are community groups and grandmothers and grandfathers who live there. And don't they deserve better?
What, if any, possible solutions are there?
I'm really not sure. I think that's probably for better minds than mine. I think that you have to start building trust in the community with the institutions that are supposed to be providing services. That goes from the local police department to the Illinois State Police to the prosecutors to the city government. And the housing authority and the street department, that the idea is that simple basic services like having good streets and having vacant lots mowed and trash picked up, when those things come together and the people start believing in the services that are being provided, including the police, I think you might start to see a change. And, East St. Louis is a great place. And it's got a lot of potential. It's very close to downtown, but it needs to have some sort of transformative push to get it to become what it could be.
What's next in your series?
We're looking at a couple of cases. A shooting that happened outside the club casino back in 2000 that went unsolved. There was a suspect, but there was never any arrests. We're also looking at a murder that happened in the housing projects to a young mother who was gunned down in front of her child. And there were suspects, but there were no arrests. So Of course, we don't know the reasons why, but we're laying that out there to get people to kind of understand that there should be a resolution to some of these cases. But just the overwhelming crush of having case after case after case after case puts a lot of pressure on a police department. They don't have time to go back and do cases once they've gone cold.
You mentioned distrust in institutions, and you mentioned both police and prosecutors. Is it more a police issue or a prosecution issue why these murders are going unsolved?
I think there's a combination. I think you had some really talented investigators on the East St. Louis Police Department who got into some trouble, and you've had some police chiefs get into trouble. And that makes the prosecutors distrust the police, and then the police feel like the prosecutors won't listen to them, and there's just this cycle of distrust, and I think maybe you need to kind of take a breath. Everybody needs to take a breath and start all over again.
Beth Hundsdorfer, investigative reporter for St. Louis Public Radio. Her series and of your collaborator, who is?
George Palazic.
Their work is online at stlpublicradio.org. It's also been published in the Belleville News Democrat. Beth, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.